Good morning and welcome to another Account-Based Friday. And we've got a great guest, Justin Sharratt from Boston. You may know Justin from a variety of different big public and private software companies. His wheelhouse is really marketing operations, although he has run marketing in the past. Vistaprint, Time Inc., Calibra, LogMeIn, a number of companies. Really excited to get Justin here. And you probably have seen him speak on some of the MarTech conferences as well, Scott Brinker's conference being one. And so this week's question, and actually before I get to the question, I should probably take a step back and first acknowledge the people that are joining us, but also acknowledge this time and situation that we find ourselves in. Justin and I were just talking, and Justin, I think you have friends and family that have been impacted, as a lot of people have. It's kind of a unique situation that you and I get to go on LinkedIn Live here in the comforts of our home. But do you have any reactions or thoughts to what's happening right now in the world?
I think just acknowledging the tragedies happening over in Israel is certainly something that we should acknowledge and recognize how privileged we are to be sitting here and talking about marketing and software when a lot of people have much more serious things that they're thinking about right now. I think it's great to acknowledge that and recognize the tragedy that's going on there right now.
Yeah, we feel really blessed to be able to have this conversation today, considering what's going on in the world. It is just it's stunning. As if sales and marketing isn't challenging enough. Now we have yet another global government issue, problem, whatever you want to call it, happening. Kind of pivoting back, I think, to this week's conversation, I structured the poll in and around marketing operations and really want to dig into this poll. And as you know, LinkedIn polls, they're limited on the number of characters that you can put in and interpretation and all that. But what I've kind of heard from a few people is in my marketing operations community, of which I know a few people, including Justin, I started hearing a little bit of frustration bubbling up from a couple of contacts, and that kind of prompted me to also create the poll to say, well, why isn't it that marketing ops is getting the sunshine in the organization? And so the choices that I laid out here or the question was, why is marketing operations not scaling even more than it is today? And we're going to dig into the comments in a moment, but the choices I put in were budget constraints, talent, and perceived internal value. My blink reaction was budget. Having been a former CMO, that's probably my number one thing is budget and people. So my blink reaction was budget. But I don't know, Justin, what was your reaction to all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the internal value answer was the one that I actually thought might get the most votes. I think a lot of the other answers are kind of a result of internal value, right? When the perceived internal value of marketing ops is low, you're not going to get the headcount that you need to support your business. You're not going to get the budget that you need to support your business. So I think I think there's a cause and an effect, and I think the cause is probably the perceived internal value, and the effect is budget constraints, talent shortage, etc. So I didn't surprise me, but I also wouldn't have been surprised if budget constraints or talent had been number one as well. Those are all major challenges that I think our marketing ops community is facing right now.
Yeah, it was interesting because I just spent a few days at the Pavilion Go-to-Market conference here in Nashville, and I noticed that one of the presenters was a retained recruiter, and they were talking about RevOps and marketing ops as a valued skill set. Now, this is from a retained recruiter, which I thought was interesting, and neither of which had really a marketing background, but what they were hearing from boards and CEOs. So in my mind, I was thinking, well, how is it that the retained recruiters are hearing that, and yet, when I run this poll, there's this perception issue that was the number one issue. It got over half the votes, or close to half the votes, of people saying, hey, there's a big time problem here. And the only thing that I could reconcile is in today's environment with PE firms, they're all about efficiency,
Yeah.
and PE seems to be eating the world right now. So maybe with efficiency in PE, they're valuing the operational effectiveness, maybe more so than in the past. But there still seems to be a pretty seismic disconnect between what I heard in that conference on that one particular session. And it was a great conference, by the way. I'm just saying this one session where the retained recruiter was saying, oh, yeah, it's a really valued skill set. And yet when I run the poll, I'm getting something very, very different in terms of a point of view. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean,
perception of value?
I think there absolutely is. It is a valued skill set. I think the challenge becomes when you do have budget constraints, not necessarily at the marketing ops level, but at the marketing or org level, right? And they're looking for things to cut. Marketing ops comes with tools, right? And cost centers from the perspective of the internal marketing leader, right? Like the CMO or the VPs of marketing. They look at the tools that their teams use and they say those are costs. They don't drive revenue. And they look at the marketing team and they say the marketing team is about support and operational efficiency. They're not about driving pipeline, which is the wrong way of thinking about it, right? I think that is
Right.
a wildly inaccurate view, but that's the way that a lot of leaders think about it. They think about it as, we need to update the website, we need to update the branding, we need to invest in events. And so, some of those things are absolutely important, but you can't do those things well without a strong marketing operations team. And I think what happens is you do those things, you get your messaging right, you update your website, you go to these great events, but then nothing comes of it because you don't have the operational support to do something with those leads, to do something, to activate that messaging. So I think there is the people that are actually doing it day to day within the marketing org recognize the value. I think the PE firms recognize the value, but I think there's sometimes a disconnect with whether it's the CFO or the CMO who is trying to tighten their belts and doesn't realize that these perceived cost centers are actually driving value, and that's something that I think is missing right now, and probably the reason for why you're seeing that. The other thing I'll say is, marketing ops typically is like a percentage of your total marketing org, right? So if you have, let's say, I've heard it's anywhere from 10% to 25% of your marketing org should be marketing ops, depending on how big your organization is. So if your organization is 10 or 15 and you only have one marketing ops person, that person may be highly valued, but for some reason they feel undervalued because they're not, the leadership's not willing to invest in a second person to help that person, right? They have to be both a strategic leader, but also somebody who's doing the execution work. And so that person feels undervalued because they're not given any help, even though the organization places huge amount of value on them because they have such great responsibility. So I think, maybe that's part of this as well. In how people are perceiving the question.
Yeah, and Miles has a good point in here. And by the way, I should mention, if you have questions or comments, like Miles has done, you feel free to lob them in the LinkedIn comments, and we can promote them up. But his idea here, perspective bias, might be at play there as well. And that got me thinking too, as Miles brings that up, of just the different levels or generations now that are working. You've at a point in time where we've had more generational disparity than we've ever had in the workforce. And I wonder if some senior level leaders are just not steeped enough in the tools and understanding, which also could add to kind of the perception of the value or not value, because they didn't grow up in the tools.
Yeah.
The tools were kind of came after the fact, whereas 80% of the generations that are working now have grown up on these tools, and it's a way of life. So
Yeah, and that's changed. I think that's changing, right? I don't think we're fully at the point where every leader grew up with the tools, but I think more leaders are comfortable, not necessarily in the tools, but understanding the importance of the tools. And there's certainly exceptions to that. And some leaders have adapted to that, and some have grown up with it. I think the big thing is trusting your employees and your leadership team, right? And getting feedback from them and understanding like who are the valuable people in the team, who are the people that are adding the most value, across the organization. And oftentimes, if you did a poll, you'd find that everyone in the marketing organization looks at the marketing ops person or a marketing ops team as the glue keeping things together. So I think that's an important thing. It's not just about the leader understanding the tools and the leader being able to use the tools. It's the leader understanding the value that the ops teams bring and getting that understanding the value through, organically through the rest of the marketing organization. And you find oftentimes when marketing ops person leaves the organization, the rest of the team gets nervous. Like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to send out emails? How are we going to, do our paid search ads? How are we going to, manage our content? There's all these questions that the marketing team has when an ops person leaves that I don't think the leaders of the organization realize how much chaos that creates.
Yeah, and mainly because those marketing ops leaders have a lot of legacy knowledge. They know where the bodies are buried, and you start moving things around and moving the cheese around. It takes a long time for people to get into those systems and understand
Yeah.
how they were built, how they were designed, what the data structure is,
Yep.
what impacts changes have.
Yeah.
And sometimes leaders can really
And I think,
underestimate that.
yeah, and I think a good ops leader is doing a lot of documentation, is trying to do a lot of training and enablement. But there's only so much that marketers, whether it's field marketers or content marketers or web marketers, actually like how much they want to know about the details, right? They want to know what they need to know to do their job. And so they have a good, I don't want to say superficial in a negative way, but a very solid understanding of what's going on, but not why it's going on or how it goes on. And I think that's something that gets underestimated. That's where that tribal knowledge comes in. It's not just about documenting the tribal knowledge. It's walking the walk of that tribal knowledge and understanding, how things work, not just what the outcome of that work is.
There were some good comments here at the bottom. I'm going to bring back the poll here, and although it's in 3 font, I'll read them out. We had Josh Hill, who also is a great operator as well, and he was talking about alignment as an issue, which I definitely want to double click into. And then Leah Russo, I kid around. I say she's the much younger sister from another mother. We don't know who the relative is, but we don't think we're related. But she also too said misalignment with RevOps on priorities. I think there's 2 issues there. One is, kind of the alignment, and the second is where does RevOps play into all of this? Do you have a perspective on either one of those? I mean, those are big topics. But
I mean, I think we say a lot. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. Right. So I think I think misalignment of priorities hits on a few different things. One is like, do you know what your priorities are? Number one. And number two, are there the right amount or are there too many, such that they all are priorities, in which case none of them are priorities. So I think, that's kind of maybe separated into 2 different things. So I think, having an understanding of what are the most important things that you need to do as a marketing ops organization is extremely important, and understanding and communicating what those things are is really the key. It's not just about knowing the priorities, it's about communicating how you're going to work on those priorities. What are the expectations for you and your team as well as other teams? So I think if you can do those things well, it makes a lot easier. But I think ops teams, whenever there's a problem, whether it's a priority or a goal or a challenge or a problem or something's broken, like it gets thrown their way, right? Even if they're not the main stakeholder, at some point, somebody is going to come to them and say, hey, I need your help. And that's where it becomes really difficult for ops teams to figure out, well, do I continue working on this strategic priority that is for my team? Or do I go help with that thing that's broken on that other team that's their strategic priority, right? So, I think that's a big challenge is, with priorities and goal setting is you have these org level priorities, and then you have the marketing team priorities, and then you have your individual team priorities. But at the end of the day, every single priority ends up becoming work for the marketing ops team to do. And that's, where I think it becomes a challenge.
Yeah. And those priorities can go pretty deep too, or
Yes.
the associated work to troubleshoot, which
Yes.
I also think is a senior level oversight. Like they, just make that happen, just figure it out. And guilty, I did that too, but
Yeah.
it's taken me a while to really understand that the depth that you have to go through to troubleshoot, you almost have to look at it and say, hey, is this worth the time and energy, or should I outsource this and have it handled differently? Because they can be very time consuming to troubleshoot those issues from an operational,
Absolutely.
whether it be RevOps or marketing ops issue. You got to be really thoughtful. But speaking of, well, actually, before I get to RevOps, I will make one other comment. We've been talking about alignment for as long as I've been in sales and marketing, which has been like forever. And it came up a lot at the Pavilion conference as well. In fact, that same presentation from Egan Zender, where they talked about the top 10 issues that they hear from boards and CEOs, it was a top 3 issue, alignment. Now, they called it sales and marketing alignment, but I think it could be any alignment. It could be product alignment, alignment with customer success. It just goes to show in this, especially in a volatile environment, it's still a challenge 10, 20 years later. I don't know if we're ever going to arrive at fixing it. It may continuously be an issue.
And I almost think it's less about like having the goal setting and more about like having a relationship with those teams, right? So when you are talking with those teams, interdepartment communications, right? So if the marketing ops team and the sales ops team is talking every day, or the marketing team and the sales team is talking every day, and there's a trust and there's a relationship there, I think the alignment is a lot easier. When there's a mistrust, when there's a lack of communication, that's where the alignment becomes a problem. The other thing I'll say is like when you're hitting your goals, nobody talks about alignment being a problem. When you're missing your goals, everyone talks about alignment being a problem. And I think a lot of that is a function of like appropriate goal setting, right? Like, some of these companies set wildly, outrageous goals, right? Or KPIs that like there's no chance of reaching. And then people end up like pointing fingers at each other. And that's when the misalignment happens, right? Like, we missed our number because marketing did this, or we missed our number because sales did that. Like, no, that shouldn't be part of the conversation. If you have a good trusting relationship with each other, like we missed our number, period, right? Like, or we missed our number because we as a collective group did not collaborate effectively, right? Like, so I think, there's a lot of this. I think it's trust, I think, is a big thing. I know at Calibra, my previous company, we met every week with the BDR team, not just like the BDR leader, but the managers. We met with the individual BDRs, and the relationship was really strong, and there was never finger pointing at each other. It was like, hey, we have this challenge. How do we tackle it together? And I think that's really important, in building those relationships leads to a perception of better alignment, right? The problem, I really feel strongly that like the reason alignment comes up so much is because people are don't build the relationships, and then place blame, and don't have that respect and collaborative nature when they miss their goals. If every company hit their goals every quarter, we wouldn't be talking about alignment problems, right? Like we'd be talking about like every company would be out there like, look at how great our alignment is. But like, that's not necessarily, to me, it's like the what is it? The tails wagging the dog or something like that, right? Like,
I think that's a great observation because you're right. It seems like all of a sudden I'm hearing it more and more and more about the alignment issue, and I hadn't really reflected on the times that we're in right now. There's certainly a reason why that could be coming up, and it's also a pretty challenging time with people moving in and out of organizations, executives changing their mind on priorities and markets. And by the time, it's like the whip game that we played in school, like you make a little change at the beginning, and at the end of the whip, people have to run and catch up to it. So it's very challenging to kind of play catch up to.
And people feel like they have a target on their back, right? People are watching, worried about their job security. And, I think talk about this a lot with my teams in the past is like when people start working scared, they don't do their best work, their performance goes down and the results of the company go down. So, when people start putting their head down and working because they don't want people to like notice, that they're there, that's a problem. Like you got to keep your head up and you work confidently and you work collaboratively. And that's when results happen. When you work scared and you feel like there's a target on your back and you're worried about your job security, that doesn't make you work more or harder or better. It actually makes you work worse. And I think companies have really screwed that up over the last, maybe 2 or 3 years is they've made employees feel scared and people don't do their best work when they're scared. So,
yeah, you make a good point too about the relationship side and just thinking about the birth of RevOps here too. So in some organizations, you've got very separate functions, RevOps and marketing ops, both reporting in to their own branches.
Yep.
Sometimes they're collapsed into one organization. There's pros and cons of each scenario. And then a complicating scenario is in that second one, is it a marketing leader or is it a sales leader that runs that RevOps function? What are you seeing and what's your feeling on kind of the RevOps marketing ops divide right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. Think about this space for the last 15 years, right? Like it started with like, well, there was an IT organization and they did all the ops, right? Or maybe finance did all of the ops. And then you started realizing like, oh, okay, we weren't getting the support that we need for the functional team. So marketing ops, we kind of created these roles that used to live in IT and now they're in marketing and now they're in sales. And then maybe, I don't know, let's say 5 years ago, they're like, well, here's revenue ops. And we're going to have revenue marketing and we're going to have revenue ops. And now it's like go to market ops, right? Like we've kind of like rebranded. And now I'm hearing like, these ops teams going back into IT again. And it's like, wait a minute, this is like deja vu here. I think for me, the biggest thing is, you need specific people that have expertise in marketing ops, right? They can't be sales ops people supporting the marketing organization. They can't be marketing ops people supporting the sales organization. Like you need to have people that have functional expertise and experience doing these operational roles. So I've kind of gone back and forth on this. Like, I don't think I have any issue with, marketing ops reporting into marketing or reporting into revenue ops, as long as there is a marketing ops function, right? Like who's dedicated to marketing ops. And I think what could happen is, and I've seen this happen already with certain organizations, is when that RevOps team doesn't have a marketing ops person, the CMO then goes and hires the marketing ops person themselves anyway, and it comes full circle again, right? So now you have like a marketing ops, like, who's responsible now? Is the RevOps team that's responsible for marketing ops, or is this new marketing ops or marketing strategy or marketing technology person that the CMO hired, are they responsible for it? So I think as long as there's a clear, I'll use the word, no pun intended, but like alignment again, like as long as there's alignment there, or an understanding of who's responsible for what and, what role is responsible for what, I think it can live in either organization. I think, your point about who leads that team is a really good one, because who leads that team is going to impact how much time and effort and what resources are given to those functions. Sorry, I have this shadow. There we go. Move over a little bit. That's better. So I think what I'm seeing is when that RevOps leader, that go-to-market ops leader, is somebody from a pure sales ops background, they're not prioritizing hires for the marketing organization. And that's when the marketing team, the CMO, realizes, hey, I gotta rebuild this team inside my organization. When that
scenario, go ahead.
When that RevOps person is a marketing ops person, which I'm seeing less and less, I'm not seeing that as often. I think there's some core sales ops functions that marketing ops like just doesn't know about, right? Like capacity planning and compensation planning, things like that are blind spots. So it's important for whoever's leading the team to have a really strong functional leader under them, right? So I think it's a mistake to have like a VP of RevOps and then have like a junior marketing ops person, right? Like that's just not going to be successful. So I think if you're going to go down that road, you need to make sure that you build the organization, with some leadership as well as some individual contributors who are strong.
Yeah, your second scenario there reminded me of kind of the inverse of that, where if you have a marketing ops person working for a RevOps person, what I've also seen is some of the reporting and some of the priorities don't necessarily get addressed by RevOps.
Right.
So, and if you flip that model around, I'm sure if you put a marketing ops person on top of that function, just like you said, the territory planning, lead routing, commissions, those types of things probably take a backseat to a marketing ops person. I met a person recently who has a number of operational functions reporting into him, marketing ops, rev ops, legal ops, like 3 or 4 other ops for his company, a fairly large company. And he basically said that he was able to get people to work together toward one vision and one idea as one team, to kind of unify that. But I think that's very, very challenging because like you kind of identified, there's blind spots on each one of those leaders, and somehow they got to compensate for that, and compensating with a more junior hire is not going to get there.
No, I agree. And I think the smaller the organization, I think the easier it is to have like marketing ops and sales ops separate. I think as organizations get a little bit bigger, I think it becomes a little bit easier. But then as they become really big, I think it becomes harder again. So I almost think there's like it's like a U curve or a reverse U or something like that. It's like keep them separate and then bring them together, then kind of separate them out again as the size goes through the ebbs and flows.
Here's a good question, Charles, and we're brushing up toward the bottom of the hour here, but I don't know if you have a point of view on this. What are some ways to align MOPS and RevOps priorities strategically and tactically if they're separate? That's a great question.
Yeah, well, I would first and foremost say that RevOps in marketing ops should never be separate. I think if it's marketing ops and sales and customer success ops, I think are like the two separations. If you have a RevOps function, marketing should be part of revenue, right? So I think it's like the name is kind of important in my opinion. Like RevOps should include marketing. If you're calling RevOps and it sits in sales, and you're calling marketing ops, it sits in marketing, that to me is already creating conflict in responsibilities based on the name itself. So if we're assuming, that RevOps responsibilities are sales and customer success and marketing ops is considered marketing, I think the biggest thing for me is that communication, right? Like they should be meeting every day. They should have Slack channels together or Slack conversation together. They should have weekly alignment meetings to talk about each of the different functions. So, my last company, we had a weekly analytics meeting. So it was the sales analytics team and the marketing analytics team. They met every week. We had a weekly technology meeting that was the sales technology and the marketing technology. And then we brought in business applications as well from the IT team. So I think having like really clear lines of communications is important. And then understanding like what are the big projects that you're going to tackle together and making sure that you have representation from both teams on those projects. And those people are, have a consistent roadmap, and understanding what their priorities are, what their limitations and resources are. So I think it's like, literally, it's just like talk to each other, like meet every week, talk every day, and there won't be surprises. And make sure that you understand who's doing what and what the separation of responsibilities are. And then you won't be running into each other. You'll be saying, oh, this isn't my area. This is the sales ops team or this is the RevOps team. Go talk to them. And the RevOps team will say the same thing. Oh, this isn't a sales or customer success question. This is a marketing question. Go talk to them. So like open lines of communication and again, trust and respect is the way to make sure that you're aligned and doing your, standard stuff, doing your quarterly planning together, doing your annual planning together. Like that should be obvious, but it's not always obvious, right? Like you should absolutely be doing your planning as an operational team, regardless of where you report into.
When I read that question, just to add on to what you're saying, I agree with you about getting in the room. It made me wonder if in that scenario, I don't know if it's Charles personally, but I could see a scenario where you could get pinched in the politics of a sales leader wanting to do something and a marketing leader wanting to do something else.
Yeah.
If these functions reported directly into those. And I think to your point of getting people in a room, what that does is it eliminates objections. So if there's a disconnect on priorities, it's going to get flattened out. So I would almost encourage like the leaders and the RevOps and marketing ops leaders, in addition to the sales and marketing leaders, they're all in that one room together. And maybe you're just updating, here are the things that I'm working, here are the top 3 things each function's working on, so everybody sees it. And I think in times past when we've brought people into a room, it forces people to have a dialogue. It forces the conversation. It forces objections that may come up, like, hey, how come you're working on this? You should be working on that. It might be uncomfortable at first, but I think if you get into that kind of rhythm, it may pay dividends down the road. So that could be another way. And I think it's related to exactly what you're saying, Justin. Like you're almost saying, hey, work it out at the local level. I just wonder if the leaders are steering the marketing ops and the rev ops into those opposite directions.
And this is no disrespect to C-level executives, but I would say like they're not always the smartest people in the room, right? So they should be, and they don't always have as much like granular business understanding as some of the other people in the room. So I think I would look to those leaders with the CMO or the head of sales or the head of go-to-market ops, or whatever, rev ops, whatever it is, like lean on your teams to say, like, what do you recommend? Right? Like there's a conflict between the sales leadership priority and the marketing leadership priority. Like, hey, marketing ops, hey, rev ops, hey, marketing, hey, sales, like, what are you seeing on the ground floor? Like, what do you recommend about this? And lean on those people, lean on your lieutenants, for their recommendation, rather than trying to pretend like the CMO or the head of sales is like all knowing and the single source of truth in the conversation. I think that's where a lot of like, VPs and directors go wrong, is they don't challenge the leader when they either disagree or they see something, see an opportunity. So I would highly encourage the marketing ops and rev ops people out there, like, do you see a conflict? Like, provide a recommendation, and even if it goes against that leader, like if that leader doesn't appreciate you, providing your expertise, then they don't value your expertise. And that's obviously a problem in and of itself. So, don't be afraid to challenge the norm and challenge not necessarily challenge the authority, but challenge, the way of thinking, if there's conflict in particular.
Well, as I suspected, we could talk all day on this topic, and we're at time here. But before I wrap up, any closing thoughts on MOPS or efficiency or trends?
No, I mean, I really appreciate the time, and for everyone that joined or will watch in the future. I think there's a lot of stuff on people's minds right now with the market the way that it is, the marketing ops world the way that it is, the world the way that it is. And so I think it's great, John, that you're giving space for people to talk and ask questions and and figure out how to solve some of the problems that they're dealing with right now.
Awesome. And next week, my co-host Megan Hewer, formerly of Serious Decisions, rejoins us. She had a board conflict today, so wasn't able to make the discussion, but we'll be joined also by her former colleague, Lucy Gillard, also a fellow Bostonian with Justin. She was a Forrester analyst. She ran demand at Akamai. She's going to be talking a little bit about the demand strategies next Friday, same time. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.